Jacqueline Grady, and welcome to SUNY Oneonta's In Discussion. With me on today's program is producer, director of the documentary The Sacred Run, The Lotus and the Feather, Andrea Sadler. Here's a preview.
After living in Japan for 3 years, I read in the Japan Times about the Sacred Run, an annual international run for peace and environmental awareness founded by Native Americans. To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the atomic bombings, the 4,000-kilometer run would end in Hiroshima on August 6th and then in Nagasaki on August 9th.
Sacred Run is a continual prayer from morning till night, and that prayer is about understanding our relationship with Mother Earth. Belief has endured over thousands of years. We are related. All living species, we are related. We are related to the trees. We are related to the birds. We are related to the fish. Upon the moon as our grandmother and the sun as our oldest brother and the earth as our mother. That's our message. It's very, very simple.
Andrea began her career as a filmmaker in 1987 with her critically acclaimed film, The Red Shoes. She has traveled extensively in Asia, where she produced and directed The Sacred Run, The Lotus and the Feather. The documentary has been broadcast on the Hallmark Channel and screened at the Cannes Film Festival. Andrea and her husband also lead a workshop for students in grades 3 through 5 called Shakespeare is Elementary. Please welcome Andrea Sadler. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Pleasure to be here.
So I know that you were born in Toronto, yes, and that you went to Concordia University in Montreal, Quebec. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you got to the position that you're at today?
Well, I started in journalism in Ottawa, and then I found journalism was a little too dry for me. I wanted to do more creative writing and fiction, so then I learned that I could get a degree in film production, and my first love was acting, so I thought, well, if I learn how to make films, then I can act in my own films. So I went into film production at Concordia. They had a very good program there, and ended up doing a lot of acting in other students' films, so that satisfied that side. And then I also began an interest in Southeast Asian religion because I was invited to be on the crew of a film they were shooting in India, a documentary film they were shooting in India about the Kumbh Mela festival. And I was invited to be the sound assistant, so I kind of focused on learning sound so I could be prepared to go. And I took a course in religions in Southeast Asia to learn what this was all about. And then I read about Buddhism, and I was just like, wow, this makes so much sense to me. And I was fascinated by Buddhism and Hinduism and all the East Asian philosophies and religions. And I ended up not going to India that time. The dean of my school said that there was a chance that it was very competitive at Concordia, so he said there was a chance that I might not finish the year and I would have to apply again and audition or submit work to get accepted the next year, and each year it diminished the amount of people that were accepted. So I was a little afraid to take that risk, so I stayed on in Concordia. I ended up going to India after university. 1987 or 89 I went to India. So right after I graduated I went to India. But while I was in Concordia, my first film was Roselle, New Jersey, a short film. And then I made this film called The Red Shoes, which was based on or inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Red Shoes. And it was the idea that of this dancing girl who can't stop dancing, and the dancing controls her, and she can't stop. It was, as a child, I heard the story, and it just terrified me. So and when I was 21 years old, I had this, I was terrified of what was happening on the planet. I just thought, if we continue this path of destruction and war and abuse of the environment, I felt it was like a snowball effect, and that we would lose control. So I had to find an answer. I stayed up one night, all night, sitting outside, and I was like, I'm not going in the house until I get an answer. And I was filled with kind of despair, and I was crying, and then I had this kind of epiphany that what we needed to do was to return to spirit, that there needed to be a balance between matter and spirit. And I didn't grow up in a religious, per se, background, but I grew up in a Unitarian church. You learn about all the churches, you learn about all the religions. So I've had an eclectic education about religion and spirituality. So it was just the idea that there has to be a balance between spirit and matter. And the theme of finding this balance is a thread that has run through my work and continues to run through my work. I mean, the next project is also about balancing spirit and matter.
So let's talk about your field, the Sacred Run, the Lotus and the Feather. Can you talk about, the background, a brief background on this film, and how you got the idea for it all, and where it came from, and then discuss the film a little bit with us?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. It's a wonderful story because I was teaching English in Japan, and I wanted to make a film, but I wasn't sure what the subject was going to be, and I had a few ideas swimming around my head, and then one day I read the Japan Times, and it said that Native American Indians were coming to Japan to run for peace and environmental awareness. And it was just, I remember literally hitting the paper with my hand saying, this is the film I'm going to make. And I called the organization in Japan, their office, and they said, well, you would have to ask Dennis Banks. He's the founder of the Sacred Run, and you need to ask his permission. So I said, oh, will you please have him call me when you get a hold of him? Please relay this message. And I didn't hear from them for 10 months went by. And I was very naive, and I thought they would call me when they heard from Dennis, and he would call me back. So I waited patiently. And then one night I had this dream that I was praying to a friend who was a dear friend of mine who was an amazing filmmaker, and he was kind of a golden spirit, just a beautiful heart guy. And he actually died while he was making a film on faith. So I had a dream that I was praying to his spirit. And then in the dream, there's a whole bunch of symbols. I'm not going to go into it, but in the end, there was fire, and I I woke up like feeling like I was on fire from the image in the dream. And I was like, I have to call them today. I have to call the Sacred Run office and find out what's happening. I could barely wait till they open, you know. And I called them up, and they said, "Oh well, Dennis Banks is. We're sorry, we forgot, right?" And they said Dennis Banks is actually coming to Japan next weekend, and you could meet him at this place. And they gave me an address where I could go, and so I thought, "Wow, this is really amazing." So sure enough, I had it's kind of strange. I studied film production in Concordia, and when I went to Japan, I heard about this festival. I was living in one town, and I heard about a festival in another town, and I went to this festival, and a mutual friend they were having a party there, and I walked in, and it was a guy I went to school with in Concordia was in Japan.
Wow.
So yeah, so we're like, what are you doing here? So anyways, he and I always talked about film and what we make films about. So I spoke to Ken and said, I want to make a film about, the Sacred Run. And he agreed to be cameraman, and we were going to do this together. And so I was playing taiko drums, and I had a competition. Our group had a competition. So I couldn't go, so I sent Ken with a friend and a camera crew. And Dennis didn't get the message. And I went the next day, and then I arrived, and everybody was like, who are you? Yeah. What are you doing with cameras? This is like a sacred run. Right. So Dennis was very suspicious of me. He hadn't got the message that I was wanting to do this. Anyways, I asked him permission there, and then he thought about it for about 3 months, and then he wrote back and said I had permission to film it, because it was a spiritual event, and there was a lot of, I had to be very sensitive to what the material was and the events that were happening.
So can you talk about the Sacred Run itself?
Sure,
and events?
Yeah. So the Sacred Run was founded by Dennis Banks. He's the American Indian leader. And this started back from an idea in 1977 where the Native community felt that there was a need to carry the message that all life is sacred, because their cultural ways and spiritual ways needed to be bolstered and strengthened. So they decided to start this run, the Sacred Run, to actually carry the message from village to village in the old tradition of running, to carry a message, and that the runner would be supported with prayers. So basically, Dennis Banks started this run. I think the first one was in the late 70s. They ran from Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Hokkaido. And then in 1995, it was the 50th anniversary of the bombings. So Dennis felt that it was necessary to close the circle. So we ran from Hokkaido to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it was an international run. People were invited from all over the world to join the run, to help carry this message that all life is sacred. And there were people from 14 countries. There were 80 people from 14 countries. And, we supported each other. Everybody ran, and it was like a relay. And they have a staff that we'd carry with, several staffs actually. The staff is with feathers and prayers. And we would carry this message from village to village and speak about our message, about the importance that all life is sacred, all life is interconnected. And we would have cultural events along the way, and we would pray along the way. For example, there were a lot of nuclear power plants. There's like 50 nuclear power plants in Japan. Yeah. And so we would just stand. We weren't like, close the nuclear, but it was more like we would just pray. Yes. It was all about prayer, and, so it was like a positive action to raise awareness. Yeah, that's amazing. And it was a transformational journey for every single person that ran and every single person that was touched by the runners. And there was a child, there was a 2-year-old, and the eldest was a 72-year-old. So there were families running, and it was like this microcosm of the macrocosm of society. It was like people from all over the world.
Diversity
and different cultural backgrounds, different. It was challenging to say the least.
I bet it was an amazing experience, though, I'm sure.
It was for me. It was a life-changing experience.
Yes.
It was also very difficult because when you're filming a spiritual event, not everybody's comfortable with that. So there were some people that didn't feel comfortable with me filming, even though I had permission. So there was some, it was very challenging at times. But for me, what's really been incredible, I finished shooting that was in 1995. We started in June 21st and finished on August 9th. And then after the film ended, I had no money. I put every cent I had to make the film. And I had no money to get home to Canada. I had no job. I had no house. I had about enough gas money to drive back to where I had been living. And it was just miraculous things. A Japanese friend just said, here's $2,000. Go make your film. Me Buddha, you Buddha, everything Buddha. Just go make your film and spread the message. And then I came back to Canada, and it took about 6 years to complete the film because I had to raise more money. I didn't have a job, and I had to work part-time while I was editing, and I actually shot the film on 60 millimeter and then finished it on the digital. So I was like at the bridge of film and digital.
Right.
And thank goodness digital came, because I could really play with the effects and the layering and the titles, and it was a lot quicker to do that.
It sounds like it's an overall just life-changing experience for you,
it's just been, I mean, the challenges of finishing it made me have to use the teachings I had, or practice the teachings I had, because I really wanted the film to be not from my head. I wanted it to be like a channel for a greater message, and really touch people in their hearts, and hopefully inspire people to change, not by saying you should do this, but by inspiring people to feel compelled to understand that we're all connected. And if I disrespect one thing, I'm disrespecting the whole. Or if every little thing we do has a ripple effect. We're not alone. And so it was, for me, after the filming of the film, I went on a personal spiritual journey where I'd be like, I wanted to go film some more things, because they went across the States, another run. And I wanted to do some more interviews on video. And I didn't have the money to get down there, and I'd be like, okay, I'd be praying, and I need help. And then something would just happen, like a friend's mother bought some kimonos that I brought from Japan, so I had just enough money to go. And each step of the way was always asking for guidance. And my favorite story is that I didn't have enough money to pay the editing suite. It was like $2,000 a week to do an avid editing. And so anyway, so my friends invited me to a wedding, and they were having a reception afterwards. And other friends of mine were going to a birthday party in the country. And my intuition said, go to the party in the country. And I was like, all my friends are going to the reception. Well, I should go there. But I was compelled to follow my intuition to make this film. So I just felt I had to go. And I went, and I didn't know why I was there. I was like, I don't even know this person. I barely know these musicians. But this woman put us in a circle, or invited us to a circle. And she shared how she knew every person. I was the only person she didn't know, right? And then she said, and this is Luc Cote, who made the Sacred Fire documentary. And I was like, I have to talk to him. And I went up to him after and I said, I need help. Can you have any suggestions? I need to edit my film. And he said, you can use our editing suite if nothing else comes forth. Yeah. And so I ended up having to use their editing suite. And they kept saying, you have 1 month. So I'd edit knowing like I had 1 more month. And then their project kept being delayed. And then in the end, I edited for 9 months. And then they said, okay, Andrea, that's it. And I finished. I remember the morning they were coming to work on their project, I put the last shot in, and I knew my film was finished. And it was like I just gave birth to this baby. It took 9 months to edit.
So you talked about the spiritual aspects and the ripple effect of our actions. And what would you say the overall objective of this film for you was that you want to display to people, your audience?
Well, for me, the main message of the film is that all life is interconnected. And that all life is sacred, of course, but I really see that the universe is, we're individual, but our atoms and energy is all connected. So I think when you understand that all life is interconnected, you might think twice before running the tap water while you brush your teeth. You might think twice before throwing a garbage on the street, because you might realize, well, then that's going to be there and someone else has to pick it up, or it's going to make a mess or whatever.
Right.
Or, I'm hoping with the film it will raise awareness and inspire people to do whatever they can, whether it's smiling at a stranger or getting involved with environmental movement or peace or activism, not just sit at home and watch TV all the time, but to really get involved, because there's so much destruction going on and disrespect. And I think the Native people really taught me that, the teachings of the Native people have transformed me completely. Because they tell us that, the trees are our brothers and sisters, and you speak to Mother Earth as she's a living entity. So, when you're taking water, you say thank you to the water, and you say, hello to Grandfather Sun or Grandmother Moon. And there's this, when you have that connection, you don't feel alone, you don't feel isolated. And you love your fellow man or creature. All the animals are relations, and that's what the Native people teach me, or teach us, and what I've learned. And one of the things that I love the most about my experience with the Native people is they have circle ceremonies. And so every single time I show my film, I always invite a Native elder, and usually they lead an opening blessing, and then after the film we have a Q&A, and then we have a circle ceremony. And Dr. Tom Porter I'm very honored that he's coming to lead the opening blessing for this. And I know he has an engagement after, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to do the circle, but that's my intention. And it's been incredible, because I feel like I'm like guided to do this. And one time it was in a festival, and the woman she didn't know my intention of having the circle, and she phoned me up afterwards, or she phoned me in the morning and said, I had a dream that we have to have a circle and sing songs about peace after your film. And I'm like, we do. That's right, we do. Because when you're in a circle, you see everybody is valuable. And, just like every plant is valuable, every critter, whether from an ant to an elephant, is important. Every human, every living creature or being is an important part of the whole. And we need to honor the sacred circle and really share the energy, because we've been living in this kind of me, and that's your fault. That's not my problem if you don't have health care or money. It's just pick up your bootstraps, and whereas if you see each other as connected, then there's a lot more caring and love flowing around.
Very nice, yes. That's very true. So I know that you've produced, you've directed, you've edited, and you also are an actress. You've been in a lot of films. So of all of those, what has this been your favorite, or what has been your favorite that you've been a part of?
I would have to say the Sacred Run has been the best. It's like my opus. Yeah. For acting, you know, as an actress, it's very difficult to get the role you want. And I've done a lot of films that are not really the type of film I want to make, but I need the money to make my films, so sometimes I did films that were about killers, or like very opposite to what my values are. But you know, I really don't want to do violent films. I could probably make a lot of money making, you know, horror films, but I feel that everything's energy, and I don't want to contribute to more fear. Right. And as an actress, I don't want to do any more of those kinds of films either. But I'm, you know, working on a script right now for a new film, which I'm hoping that I can act in. But, you know, we'll see where that goes.
So what does the future look like for you then from this point?
Well, besides promoting this film, which I feel, you know, it's had some it's gotten out there in a small level. I feel like I can't put it on the shelf until it's flying. So it's kind of like my baby that's now a teenager, and I need to, you know, give it a little push to get it flying. Yeah. Because, you know, it's time that I really give it a good energy to get it out there. So I'm redoing my website, dragonflyfilms.ca. I'm in the process of re-upping that to a better website, more interactive blogging style. I'd like to get the film in schools. I'd like to, this is universities like this one. Yep. And so I'm kind of focusing on promoting the film in the next year, but I also want to start, I have the treatment for my new script, but I'd like to, I need to sit down and really start writing and fleshing out the story, and you know, and then my husband's a storyteller, so we're working on things for him as well. And I just got married a few years ago, so that's a new venture as well.
That's great. And how's that, may I ask?
It's been great. I love it.
Great. Like the married life so far?
I do indeed. Yeah, it's great.
Any children maybe in the future?
That is a prayer of mine, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, even at my ripe old age.
You seem to have everything, you know, right in line, and it was, you know, it's been a pleasure talking with you here today, and you know, so I hope that this, you know, this works out for you, and I'm really looking to, you know, see the film myself. Actually, you know, you seem to have everything grasped, and you know, right? You're very spiritual. I don't know how you got that way. Can I ask how you got that way?
I think I've just always, I've always been aware of energy. Yeah. And I remember as a child thinking that everything is energy, and so we're infinite because energy never dies. And I think it's just been, you know, I think people are born with some awareness, or they pick it up along the way, but I wasn't indoctrinated by any religion, so I was free to experience whatever drew me, and I think I've always been sensitive to energy, and just feeling, you know, trees and animals and nature. I've always loved nature, and now that I feel like Buddhism and native spirituality are they resonate a lot with me, because it's about everything is one.
That's very nice. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Nice to meet you too, Jackie.
Nice to meet you. And I want to thank you for joining me for this edition of SUNY Oneonta's In Discussion. Please join us for future programs, and check us out on YouTube at www.youtube.com/SUNY Oneonta. I'm Jacqueline Grady. Thanks for watching.